From Lighthouse Reports, this is Backlight. Every month, we take you behind the scenes of real-world collaborative investigations.
We're your hosts, impact producer Tessa Pang
and investigative reporter Beatriz Ramalho Silva.
Hey Beatriz, how are you going? And I'm asking you this question like we haven't just spoken all day and like we don't speak all day every day.
Like we've just been in a webinar together. But I'm good. We're all very busy at Lighthouse, and I feel like I'm going to say this every month. But we have a lot of investigations coming out in the next month or two, and we'll be able to share more about that here later on.
Yes, April and May are going to be busy months for us, to say the least. But we're excited. It's all really interesting work.
Yeah, exactly. And we just published our first US-Mexico borders investigation, which is having some really significant coverage in Mexico. And we're going to be speaking with the team about that in next month's podcast. Essentially, it's a visual investigation that is reconstructing the unseen events, which saw 40 people suffocate to death in a migrant detention center fire in Juarez. And the evidence we reveal in the investigation basically disproves the official account that has been told so far. So it's a big investigation, and there's going to be a lot to talk about next month. And in the meantime, this morning, we also published a very important investigation in our Borders newsroom. It basically revealed how French police are carrying out aggressive tactics at sea in the Channel whilst receiving funding from the UK. So there's some really harrowing footage which we got exclusive access to, which is being widely circulated today. And our editor, May, that was on last month's podcast, was speaking on ITV News about it last night.
Yeah, really amazing work coming out from all parts of the team, and more to come as well. So stay tuned for sure. And also in some more exciting personal news for Beatriz and I, we got microphones. So if you noticed an audio difference in quality, it's because of our fancy new microphones that I currently have balanced on a box on my desk.
And I'm going to add some more exciting news for myself, which is I'll be at IJF, the International Journalism Festival in Perugia, in a few weeks' time. And I'm really looking forward to meeting a bunch of fellow journalists. And so if you're listening to this and you'll be there, definitely send an email. Let's link up. And if you won't make it, don't worry, because we will be recording some really great chats in Perugia, maybe over some Aperol Spritz to bring onto the podcast.
I can't be there, but I'm sure the team will have an amazing time. So today we're bringing you a little bonus episode to answer some questions about our fellowship program, which we're currently hiring for, with applications closing on April 8th. So in approximately 1 week from when this episode comes out.
Yeah, and rather than just hearing from us, we thought we'd chat to one of our former reporting fellows, Jonathan Moens, also known as Johnny, to talk about what it's like being a fellow at Lighthouse and share some advice.
And actually, Beatriz, you were also a fellow at Lighthouse at some point, right?
Yeah, I did the reporting fellowship at the end of 2021. I had very little experience in journalism when I started out. I'd been a freelancer for a few months, and obviously the fellowship was a really big learning experience for me. Talking to my friends, I think what sets it apart from some of the other fellowships or internships out there is that from the start, you're just really treated as an equals in the team. You're given loads of opportunities to share ideas, contribute stories, you get to pitch, and you're given like really challenging and interesting reporting work. But before we ring Johnny, we'll just quickly highlight some of the details. We're hiring 3 fellows, a reporting, OSINT, and data fellow, and it's a part-time fellowship for 2.5 days a week for 6 months.
Yes, and you can live anywhere in the world, and you don't need a formal degree in journalism or to be a published journalist to apply. You just really need a passion and a curiosity for investigations. And we held a webinar this morning answering some questions about the fellowship, and some of the questions we got were about the practicalities of working 2.5 days a week. And we can just say now that Lighthouse is really flexible and open to different types of schedules. So I think if you're still a student or if you are working in another job part-time, those things definitely don't preclude you from applying to the fellowship. And applications are currently open and they close on April 8th. Hey, Johnny, how are you going?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Lovely to hear your voice again.
Lovely to hear yours.
Obviously, we've worked together before, but for the rest of the listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you decided to apply for the fellowship.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a science and investigative journalist. I'm based in Rome. I have a background in neuroscience, which is somewhat unusual for investigative journalism. And I applied for the fellowship having come through the emerging journalist training sessions, which lasted a couple of weeks. I thought it would be interesting to sort of move away from science and into investigative journalism. And while I did that whole process, I found it really interesting. I was learning all these different techniques, money trial investigations, open source intelligence, all sorts of stuff. And I was encouraged to apply, and I did. And I decided that this would be a really good opportunity to sort of flesh out those things I had already sort of gotten a glimpse of.
So, Johnny, you were in the food systems newsroom. Also, from the beginning, you were kind of thrown into two big investigations,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, it was so the Copa Cogeca investigation and the second one, pesticide one, was also throughout my emerging journalist sessions, but I think it kind of seeped into, yeah, it kind of leaked into this one as well. So those were two quite, well, the Copa investigation was very big. Overall, we spoke to over 100 farmers, and I was helping out as someone who's based in Italy to sort of pursue the leads from an Italian angle because we were looking at um, a farmers union that was based in Italy called Coldiretti. And so I had written about farming in Italy before for National Geographic. And so I quite quickly, my first task was basically to contact all the farmers I knew and get to understand what their perspective was about Copa Cogeca, what their views were on organic farming versus using pesticides, these sorts of things, and then bring that into the investigation to see how that squared with what we were finding as a team. I also helped with fact checking that piece, which is mammoth of a task, considering how many people we spoke to and the fact that we had at least 5 or 6 different collaborators and different languages. Um, as for the pesticide investigations, which looked at how European banks are funding projects in developing countries that are themselves using pesticides that are banned in those respective European region. So we're trying to basically look at the hypocrisy of European banks like the EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the EIB, so the European Investment Bank. So that was really fun. We all basically took a different bank, went through their projects. They have databases with all their projects, and we tried to see which projects seemed to be sort of questionable and then dug into those. And the one that I focused on were one in Uzbekistan, which involved a cotton production investment that was very, very questionable using banned pesticides, and another in Ghana with rubber plantations that also used banned pesticides. And that was a very fun exercise.
And Johnny, you also jumped like around a few of the newsrooms. So you did some research, some reporting work for the surveillance newsroom and also for the borders newsroom. So can you speak about, what skills and different reporting methods maybe you got to develop or you got to kind of come in contact with?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, like you said, I was part of the surveillance team for a little bit, in large part because I had pitched an investigation that I had been working on before, Lighthouse, and they were interested, and so we were just sort of pursuing a lot of those leads. I was basically working one to one with a senior editor slash reporter, Crofton Black, and he really pushed me to sort of navigate the complexities of like going through legal documents that were based in India, legal documents in the US, finding contacts with very, very eccentric characters from the United States who are involved with the sort of CIA, allegedly involved with the CIA and all sorts of intelligence communities. So that was really interesting and fun. And then with the Borders newsroom, I was basically it was my idea. I wanted to just try something completely different. I'd never done some migration reporting or borders reporting. And this was a very fascinating experience of just like being put in the deep end and having to quite quickly try to understand how reporting on very fast-paced investigations that are very driven by OSINT, things like softwares like or sort of resources like marine traffic, flight tracker, cultivating sources within the European committees, all sorts of things like this I had never really done, and this was a very, very, very fast-paced and interesting exercise of just being involved in that reporter's mindset. So I enjoyed doing that very much.
Cool. Sounds like you worked on a range of different investigations. I was going to ask what your favorite investigation was, but obviously that would be the ones that you worked with the food systems team, since we were your favorite team.
So on the food systems team, my favorite was probably this pesticide one, actually, in many ways because it felt like a divide and conquer investigation at its heart. So you kind of had the freedom to sort of pursue your own interests and come up and have some sort of control over what was happening. But at the same time, you were part of a bigger puzzle and you were just providing these insights and you were checking in, and there was a lot of sort of momentum, and you could provide feedback to each other in a way that was very transferable. So like my EBRD lead was definitely useful for people who were looking at AFD, the French Development Bank, and other banks. And so we ended up actually having a very nice symbiotic relationship amongst all the people working on this investigation. Also, I think we had some quite compelling evidence, and I thought, given that it's such a difficult thing to find, especially because the legalities of pesticides is incredibly complicated, as Beatriz knows, I thought we were able to pin down some very specific things that they had done wrong.
And Beatriz, you also started Lighthouse through the fellowship program. I wonder, how did the fellowship program kind of help you develop your skills, all the skills and expertise that you currently have as an investigative journalist?
So basically at Lighthouse from the outset, I was quite intimidated to apply because I also came in with very little reporting experience, not a lot of specialist skills, and I was sort of intimidated by the world of investigations. And the point of the fellowship is that you'll have the opportunity to learn and train and develop your reporting skills, and that's what happened with me because, like Johnny was saying, from the beginning, you're kind of thrown into a bunch of different investigations. You're given challenging work. The team really counts on you. Kind of your voice matters and your input to stories matters just as everyone else. So you kind of feel very much like a peer. And at the same time, everybody at Lighthouse is not only incredibly talented, but incredibly kind. So everyone's always very happy to answer your questions. There's no like dumb questions. There's always like learning opportunities, and we're always kind of exchanging resources. And we have a bunch of internal meetings that really foster that. So I think it was really the learning on the go that, similar to Johnny, helped me develop my reporting skills, I feel.
Definitely +1 on the best part about working at Lighthouse is the team. I think that everyone is really generous with their time, and also they're all amazing people that you can learn a lot from. So I think it's an exciting place to work.
I'll echo that. I don't think I maybe expressed this enough, but yeah, I think the team's amazing, and I think incredibly talented, bunch of kind people. So it's great to go to Greece and meet all of you guys and realize that there's a lot of just great human beings also behind these great stories.
So, Johnny, back to you.
Mm-hmm.
What was your biggest takeaway from the fellowship?
Biggest takeaway. Yes, okay, I think I know. My biggest takeaway, I think, is the realization that investigations are incredibly hard to identify and to pursue, and that they require a very, very collaborative and concerted approach, like a very mindful and thoughtful approach. I think I was pre-Lighthouse, I was basically the kind of reporter who was, I think, quite aggressive in my style. So I would just sort of shoot emails very quickly, try to speak to as many people as possible because I tended to have a freelance contract for like X time. And so I basically needed to complete that assignment within a month or so. And they were slanted towards investigations, but not entirely. Whereas now that I came into Lighthouse, I realized that you could burn sources. There were stakes to like how you interact with people. You could ruin a lead. You could, you could put someone in a bad mood that is a critical source. You could just not be exhaustive enough and actually jump into things, try to publish something without really having looked at financial documents closely enough. and also be really, really kind of focused. I think this is something I learned through Crofton more than anyone. It's just like you want to be meticulous from the very beginning, because by being very focused and being very specific with how you're reporting, instead of just like contacting everyone, just contacting the key people that you think will leverage investigation and bring it to the next level. That will sort of be the way to transform something into a powerful, I think, investigation. So a kind of efficiency and a kind of slowness are the two things that I think I take from this, even though it sounds like a paradox, I guess.
And also, this is just one final question for both of you. So for people who are applying for the fellowship right now, what's one piece of advice that you have for them?
So I'll probably repeat myself a bit what I said earlier, but I would really just encourage people to apply, even if you don't feel like you have enough experience or you don't have many bylines or bylines at all. We mentioned this on our call for applications. You don't need a journalism background to apply. I think it's quite easy to feel really intimidated by the word investigative. And actually, earlier, Tessa and I had this webinar where we were fielding questions from aspiring fellows. And that's the question that came up a lot about work experience. So I tell people, like, don't stress about it. It's totally fine.
I think in some ways it's even more interesting sometimes to have people who don't have a journalistic background. So if you feel like you've come from an NGO background, or I don't know, you're just like really, really passionate in coding, but don't have formal experience, I think it's about being able to sort of show how creative you can be with those experiences. So we have people on the team who are like investigative researchers for Greenpeace, or private investigators for, clients that we'll never know about. But I think you can just be creative with how your different experiences can actually feed into this, and it's about curiosity, and it's about just a kind of relentlessness that comes with researching, I think, rather than specifically going through Columbia Journalism School and coming out and having a certificate.
Thank you so much for your time, Johnny. It's been so nice to chat with you again. We miss you a lot. And we're just going to wrap up with one final question that we ask all of our interviewees on this podcast, which is, with journalists facing threats from layoffs to censorships, what's a moment that made you think this is why public interest journalism matters?
I think just, it sounds cliche, but this experience I've had, rather than a moment, this experience has made me feel like, there's people who are actually willing to fund collaborative research investigations like we're doing. Like, there are people backing us in a way that seems genuine and sustainable, which makes me hopeful. I realize that like teams are indispensable. I find it hard right now to just be like alone in this kind of scary world of investigative research. And I realize that I'm using similar techniques by trying to speak to not just individuals, but networks, groups, associations.
Thanks so much, Johnny. We miss you loads at Lighthouse, and really looking forward to seeing your work in the near future.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's lovely speaking to you both, always.
So, to those of you who are listening to us for the first time, Backlight is a monthly deep dive into the world of investigative journalism. We talk to people across the field to get to the bottom of what makes compelling investigative journalism.
So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you should definitely subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you should also make sure to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter and on Blue Sky at LH Reports. And finally, you can reach out to us on email at backlight@lighthousereports.com. And all of those accounts will be linked in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone, and happy applying.